Excellent. Right. So welcome. As I say, I'm David Bentley, Head of Asset Management with CIPFA. You can see the picture at the top right of that side, and then Dave, who's with me, is our Property Networks Manager over on the left side. Just for a bit of background about myself, I've been with CIPFA for 22 years and been involved in a lot of property management and asset management development over the time. I actually set up the Education Property Working Estates Group that meets on a regular basis and includes various organisations, the Academy Trusts, the C of E and Catholic Diocese as well, schools, as well as some other organisations involved, and ISBL. And I don't run it anymore, but one of my colleagues, Tim Reed, who you can see at the top left, he now runs that. So I've been actively involved in education and education estates for many years. In fact, when I was in local government in Birmingham, I did a lot of work on the education estate there. Okay, so what do we want to do today? Well, this is what we set out as the aim of the day. The session will examine the critical areas that need to be considered when assets are, oh, hello, Dave, he's just appeared, shared his webcam with us. Considered when assets are unoccupied or partially.
David, yes. Sorry to interrupt.
My screen's not going
but
on.
I don't think the slides are moving on for everyone.
Oh, great. We had this problem for the day, didn't we? Righty-ho, there we go. Try that. Yeah, okay. For some reason it freezes. So there you go. I'll just move that back. Yes, okay. So now you can see the picture of me on the top right-hand side, and I will move on. Okay, so the session will examine the critical areas that need to be considered when assets are unoccupied or partially occupied within the current COVID-19 lockdown. Now it has moved on since then. We will look at work that needs to be maintained, impacts of social distancing and flexible ways of working on building use, as well as highlighting other potential opportunities that might arise. So we actually set that agenda up about a month and a half ago. So what I want to do before we start is just correct that, because that's no longer relevant. Jane has put a hand up. Jane, did you want to say something? I can unmute you. In fact, Linda's put it. No. Jane, did you want to say something? You've self-muted. No, I'm assuming that's a mistake then. If you do want to say something, by all means, as I go through this, just put your hand up or just put something in the chat box. It's not a problem. Okay. So lockdown happened back at the end of March and schools were shut. People were told not to work unless they had to and all this kind of stuff. And I'm a home worker anyway, but I tend to travel all around the country. So that's just a picture of where I am at the moment. The dog isn't there just as we speak. She tends to come and bother me usually when she wants feeding, but she usually wants attention. As I say, I have been a home worker for 22 years, traveling around the country, working with different, particularly local authorities, and doing a lot of events. But really, lockdown is totally different. Lockdown, because, for example, I have to now work in an environment where my teenage daughter is full-time at home. My wife, who is a secondary school chemistry teacher, is full-time at home and trying to, you know, teach from home as well. It is very strange, and we've all had to adapt over a period of time, but it is a continually changing agenda. So, first of all, I just want to, you know, take stock of all of that. ISBL called this an expert talk, and I don't class myself as an expert. I think we're all learning in this as we go on. I think the way that buildings will be used in the short term and how they will be used in the longer term will be a moving feast. So really, at the 8th of June, as we are now, I think this is a point in time presentation, a point in time discussion. And I know that within other events and training exercises we have done, that the world is moving so quickly with COVID and things are changing so rapidly that, you know, in a month's time, this might just not be relevant. It probably, a lot of aspects will be, but I think some bits won't be. Anyway, so that's a bit of a caveat. So I want to talk a bit more, though, about the current situation and what we know about schools going back. And I know there's a different point in time for senior schools and junior infants, but we'll just clarify that. I then, after that, want to talk a bit about other aspects, so statutory compliance, maintenance, and maybe the opportunities that empty or less occupied buildings might present. And I've left questions at the end, but I would also like a bit of debate as we go through. So I might ask you one or two questions as well. So we're going to start with what's happening now. And what do we know about COVID-19 and children, for the starters? So the World Health Organization, I know President Trump's not too enamored with them, but on the 10th of May, they said this: the role of children in transmission remains unclear and additional data is needed, including from age stratified seroepidemiologic or something like that surveys. Now, I haven't got a clue what that bit means, but it sounded impressive, so I left it on the slide. But the next bit, to date, there have been few educational institutions involved in COVID-19 outbreaks, but from these studies, it appears that disease transmission was primarily related to social events linked to school or university life, rather than transmission within classrooms. These studies also suggest that the introduction of the virus was likely by an adult member of staff. Interesting. If you want to have a look at that and read more detail about what WHO is saying on that, then that link at the bottom of the page, which you can get from the materials if you download them. And as I was sort of looking into this area, there's another interesting bit of research which comes from ISC, and they have got the latest information on schools around the world, which I must admit, probably I looked at for too long, but absolutely fascinating stuff what the different councils are doing, sorry, different countries are doing. So if you do want to have a look at that at all, then have a look at that website. The British Medical Association came out with a statement, and I was quite interested in this one. And what they said is a focus on the fixing of a date for coming back to school has been polarizing. There's different views from different people, and some of them are, you know, poles apart. But obviously, the BMA wants schools to reopen as soon as it's safe to do so, and the evidence allows. This could be before June the 1st or after. A zero risk approach is not possible. This is about safe being an acceptable level of risk. Parents up and down the UK are asking the same question: is it safe? The simple answer is, and this is from BMA, we don't know yet. And then finally, before I move on to what the governments are saying, when I was looking around for, I was looking actually for school design and design principles around COVID in relation to schools. And there's been a lot, to be honest, in relation to the built office environment, but not so much in schools. There's lots of sort of suggestions, which we'll go into. But this comes from a US organization, the National Association of Independent Schools, from their legal advisor. And I just liked what this, so the situation is evolving by the hour, very much as I started off with. Every school is struggling with what decisions are the right ones to make. And in many instances, we may not know what is right until we have the benefit of hindsight. Even then, we may not know. With that in mind, the right decision is one that considers public health guidance, the law, your school's mission and culture, and your community's safety. What is right for one school may not be right for another. And I think that's a really good quote. Anyway, let's see what our government is saying. So, in one of the various briefings, I can't remember the date. It might be on one of the later slides, but the Prime Minister got up and he said, "Okay, schools are reopening," and the full guidance that we've got from the DfE are in two main documents. So if you haven't seen those, then I recommend you look at these documents and you go through them in detail. Just a show of hands, who's been through these documents already? Few of you. Okay, probably about half. Okay, I'll just put the things down. So just to clarify, the original document was published on the 11th of May. That was updated on the 1st of June with the various suggestions for the school opening. So the guidance has been updated to reflect the announcement by the Prime Minister that the government's 5 tests have been met. And if you can't remember what the 5 tests are, let me see if I can remember them. Making sure that the NHS can cope, a consistent fall, I think, in the daily death rates, rate of infection decreasing to manageable levels, whatever manageable levels are, ensuring the supply of test and PPE can meet future demand, and then being confident that anything they introduce or any adjustments would not risk a second peak that would overwhelm the NHS. So what we do know since the announcements on the 23rd of March, education and childcare settings have only been open to priority groups, vulnerable children and children of key workers. But from the 1st of June, primary schools are meant to open for reception, year 1 and year 6, alongside those priority groups. And from the 15th of June, i.e. next week, secondary schools, sixth form and further education at colleges to offer some face-to-face support to supplement the remote education of year 10 and year 12 students and 16 to 19 learners in the first year of their course, alongside priority groups again. Okay, I must admit, I always get confused with the year 10s and year 12s coming back from the days where I did O levels, as my kids say. It's not O levels anyway anymore, and so I always get confused. But so we are targeting certain age groups and trying to supplement the homeschooling, the remote schooling that has got various degrees of success. I know, as my wife keeps telling me, you know, some kids seem to react to it very well, whilst others probably she doesn't have as much contact with at the moment. So the government is talking about a hierarchy of measures. First of all, avoiding contact with anyone that has symptoms, frequent hand cleansing, and good hygiene practices, regular cleaning of settings, minimizing contact and minimizing mixing. And they go further within the guidance to suggest that only a quarter of the pupils in the respective years 10 and 12 should be in school at any one time, with an aim to practice social distancing where at all possible, including pupils 2 meters apart from each other where possible. Now, the World Health Organization says 1 meter, but in Britain we're saying 2 meters, and plan that classes are no more than half their usual size, but acknowledging that that may vary due to individual schools' circumstances. So the document goes on and then talks about what we need to do. And I just want to run through this quickly and then start to talk about building considerations. So we need to refresh our risk assessments to understand the environment that we are going to be working in and the hierarchy that I mentioned on the previous slide. So we need to ensure that all our health and safety compliance checks have been undertaken, organise those small class groups, and keep the nucleus of children within those class groups together so we don't mix those class groups. Organise classrooms in a way that we maintain space between desks where possible. Plan lessons so we reduce movement around the schools, so the teachers probably move instead of the children. Stagger times in various aspects, so assemblies, break times, drop off and pick up times, and even expand school hours to accommodate that. And talking to different schools, they're doing it, a lot of them doing it in so many different ways, and really the face-to-face activity is much more of a supplement to the homeschooling to ensure that the children are okay, they are learning what they should be learning, and having that face-to-face contact often reinforces some of those learning messages. Just a few other things. They talk about removing unnecessary items that might cause clutter or might mean that they would mean that people to avoid them would come closer than 2 meters. So removing stuff that's not needed from the classroom. So obviously you've got to store it somewhere. Removing soft furnishings that are hard to clean. Consider travel arrangements and encourage children to walk or cycle to school if at all possible. And there's some work going on about sustainable transport links at a wider level, but we'll talk about that in a second. And finally, just really communication with parents, communication with staff, communication with children, and continuous communication moving forward. Okay, so how does that equate to the building issues? And some building issues sort of leak over into organisational, but the considerations when I talk to property professionals or people who deal with buildings, these are the things that are coming up time and time again. And as I say, I think we're all learning as we go. Some of you will be more advanced in the physical alterations you have made in your buildings already, and it'll be interesting to pull any of that out. So I might just ask 1 or 2 questions in a bit. So desk spacing, I've seen all sorts of things going on. So simply reducing half the number of desks in a classroom is one way of doing it if they're movable. If they're not, taping up every alternate desk so people can't access them. Where you've got labs where they're fixed desks and pupils have to walk behind them, maybe introducing some kind of one-way system so they don't pass each other and they walk in order of where they're sitting. So a whole load of different potential solutions to that. One-way systems, this is actually a council offices that you can see, but this is how they've adapted for one-way system if the corridor is wide enough. Some schools I know are introducing one-way systems, so just one corridor would be a particular way, and then hopefully if you've got another corridor that goes the opposite direction in another part of the school, then you can use that going the other way. Sometimes that is not possible. So actually looking at our individual circumstances, clear markings, clear signage to ensure that we can do it as best as possible while maintaining that 2-meter distance. In more junior schools and infant schools, making it a game. So with the arrows on the floor, making it some kind of game that they follow the arrows, and various different solutions coming up. Sneeze screens, probably not such a major issue for schools, but there might be key points, maybe in the canteen or where depending how children might pay for meals, but if there's a pay station, maybe a sneeze screen there, maybe at reception, if people have got access, that you might want to think about putting something up. I know that there's a shortage of perspex, evidently, with all the organisations, the shops, the offices putting up these kind of things, but it might be something to consider about within schools. If you've got lifts within your building, then maybe putting something on the floor. There's a wider government document on the organisation of office space post-COVID, and it's got some pictures of various situations, and one of them's within lifts where it's got about 3 or 4 different lines on the floor where people stand and they actually face the walls where the lift goes up. So if you have got lifts in your buildings and you need to use them, maybe some markings like that. Toilet access, restricting toilet access or developing a safe route into using those toilets. I know one school I was talking to, they just allow 1 pupil in at a time. Whether that's feasible or not, I'm not sure, but opening up staff toilets as well. So looking around the school and seeing how you can actually manage this process. Wash points, the World Health Organization calls for creating a sort of schedule of more frequent hand washing, making it an exercise with younger children, and maybe even having that hand washing time, breakout time to wash hands at certain times to ensure that's done on a regular basis. Providing additional bins if we want to get rid of tissues and the like. Somebody's asked, Vix Moore's asked about ventilation systems. I must admit, I've seen nothing in detail apart from what is on the government guidelines. So the government guidelines talk about propping doors open. Obviously, if it's a fire door, you've got to be careful you can't do that. And allowing more ventilation through by opening windows, and also carrying out lessons outside. I haven't seen anything more than that, to be honest, about ventilation. Okay, access. Trying to look at access points across the school, maybe fire escapes, allowing people to enter, or allowing particular classes to enter through other doors that are available, and obviously expanding the frequency of times that people can actually come in. Every school must still provide meals, and so the flow into canteens, staggering again the time that people use it. Some schools are stopping the use of shared resources altogether. So I know my wife's school, they use iPads and every child has got an individual iPad, but they are not providing communal iPads at the moment. They're giving every child an individual one. Travel arrangements, encouraging parents not to do the drop off and not to wait at a particular time, encouraging cycling, encouraging walking. There's been some wider stuff going on with the government about funds to make temporary alterations for cycling and walking. Might not coincide with a school area, but it might be worth seeing if your local council are thinking or considering anything like that. And you might need to think about different cleaning regimes. Places that are high risk places like toilets, cleaning on a regular basis. And some schools are even closing the staff common rooms because of the potential for adult to adult spreading of COVID. Just a couple of final things. Body temperature scanning. The government aren't minded to introduce body temperature scanning because they don't reckon it does anything, doesn't improve anything. So, but WHO are a bit more, they think it might have some potential, but the government aren't introducing it for all schools. And then also PPE, there's no suggestion that teachers should be wearing PPE at any times. I know in Denmark they tried it and it scared some of the children, so they didn't introduce it. A few other ideas. Some Birmingham City Council, for example, have been mowing grassy spaces or grass and open spaces at 2 metre strips to encourage the sort of social distancing. And I know certain schools have been putting hoops down at 2 metre intervals also to encourage that social distancing. So a question to you, just put something in the chat box. Have you got any sort of neat ideas that you've introduced to encourage social distancing, or anything that we haven't covered? Anybody at all? If you haven't, that's fine. No, I was hoping for some inspiration, but no one's put anything in the chat box. Okay, right, I'm going to move on. A number of NGOs have contacted the government and suggesting that for as long as this goes on, trying to encourage that we have more sustainable and safe journeys to school, and they are asking the government to look at some of the busier areas and set up these school streets to try and encourage either traffic-free areas or at least safe ways in. I know Scottish government put aside, I think it was 10 million for improved cycling and footways during this, temporary measures to improve it during this period. Okay, right, so that's the physical environment. I just wish there was more information, but it's down to every single site. And as I say, I think as time goes on, there'll be more detail, there'll be more information out there. Okay, just for the last few slides, I just want to talk about some other areas before I throw it totally open to questions, and also ask a few questions of you as well. So buildings, you can't just leave them. We still need to carry out statutory health and safety inspections for building premises. Now, we produced a free guide for school premises management on the compliance issues that you need to address, and that came out in April 2018. Still very relevant. Has anyone seen that? Just put a hand up if you have. Just 2 or 3. Okay, right, well, that's a freebie, so you can just go on that website and you can download that. It is very useful. It tells you all of the frequencies that you need to do all of the various checks. So if you haven't seen that, I recommend you get hold of it. So compliance monitoring you still should do, whether your buildings are occupied or not occupied. And I've been looking at and talking to various of the organisations, either local government or the organisation that supports schools. Most of them have got some kind of unoccupied building check. So if you haven't seen anything like that from whether you're the local authority school or whether you're in a trust, or you've had no guidance, and it's just worth thinking about developing a checklist for the kind of issues you need to put in place if you've got any unoccupied premises. And they are these kind of things on this screen. I haven't got time to go through them, but these kind of issues. What I want to do on the last but one slide, though, is just raise a couple of issues for you, and just think about some of these. So I don't know if any of you have got existing construction projects when we went into lockdown, whether you'd actually got any on site, and how were they affected, whether you stopped work on them or whether you continued work. Just be mindful, or just be aware that you might get some claims off contractors for them being forced to stop work if you have got anything like that. It's probably only the occasional school that will involve. But when we think about maintenance of buildings, I'm hoping you've all got condition information about your assets and you've developed your priorities for maintenance. But to be honest, this is a real opportunity for maintenance, and it's a real opportunity to take advantage of the either unoccupied buildings or the buildings that are less occupied than normally to carry out some maintenance work. A bit of opportunistic. One school I know removed some asbestos for the particular building because they just took the opportunity there. There was no one there, and they could do it. So they moved some asbestos from one of their premises, and it was a really good opportunity. But it would be an opportunity for lettings. I'll answer that one in a bit. But it could be an opportunity for you to carry out maintenance work. And maybe if you think about where you need to carry out that maintenance work, have the children, have the school that still needs to take place in another part of that building. So just thinking about that. And the final thing is thinking about the future and how you use your buildings, whether that will change. Now, what I'm going to do is ask you a few questions. So I've got some questions up here. And so the first one, and I'll just launch this. So you'll be able to click this on your screen. You should be able to see that. So the question is, have you taken the opportunity to carry out any maintenance activity of buildings during the lockdown period? So just mark if you want to just vote. I'm hoping you can see it. Okay. All right, I've got about virtually all of you. I'm going to close it now. I've got 3/4 of you have voted. Okay, and the results of that, you should be able to see that. So only 8% didn't carry out any maintenance. 46%, just under half, yes, routine statutory maintenance and emergency works. 4%, yes, but only emergency works. 42% of you, that's what I'm good about. I'm really pleased about that. Targeted work, taking advantage of the space, the unoccupied space. Okay, great. That's the first one. Now this one, let's see what you think of this one. Do you think the way you use your buildings will change post-COVID? No, possibly, but not sure how. Yes, but focused on support functions. And then finally, yes, and is likely to include more remote learning. Okay, again, I'll give you a few seconds. And I honestly don't know the answer to this. We can speculate all we like, but I know in the office environment, when we think about offices, I can really see a massive change, a shift change. Right, I'm just going to close that one and share it with you. So 52% said possibly, but not sure how. 17% no. 4% focused on support functions, especially if you're a large academy trust where you might have an office or something like that. That's clearly going to work. But 1/4, yes, and is likely to include more remote learning. So although COVID really has knocked us about a bit as a society, as a country, as a world, I suppose, there are some opportunities that seem to be coming out of it as well, and some shift change in the channels that we traditionally use to deliver services, in this case, education. Okay. I suppose that's me for now. It has been a real shift. It's been through, and it's been a bit of a rush. But any questions that you would like to ask me? Now, there's one from Sherilyn, and I'll read that in a second, but I'm going to launch another poll. So I'm going to close that poll, okay? And I'm going to launch another one, okay. So as I say, we set up the Education Estates Working Group, and what we've done on the local government side, because we work with a lot of local authorities, and we set up a monthly webinar. It's a free online webinar discussion forum where people can raise questions of their colleagues. And we are considering doing it for education, whether we would need to do it on a monthly basis or whether we would do it on a monthly basis initially and then reduce the frequency as things develop and we're more in a steady state. So just interested in your reaction to see if you feel this would be useful for you to talk to your colleagues to host this kind of discussion. So I'm going to, just over half have voted so far, 60%. Just give you a few more seconds. If you don't think it's useful, then fine. But if it is, then we would be happy to investigate that and see if you think it would be good. Okay, right. I'm going to just share that. Well, I'm taking that as you think it's a good idea, which I'm pleased about, I must admit. But so it sounds like 3/4 of you would think it would be useful, and about a third, the other third, think it possibly would be useful. Okay, we will put that in the melting pot, and potentially we will set something up and let you have the information. We've obviously got your email addresses from this, so we will ensure you are on the circulation list. Okay, I'm just going to look at the chat box. Okay, some yellow tape across every other chair in the staff room as a reminder and also reassurance. I did see one piece of guidance from one school to the staff, and they just said that the guidance was simply, please just try and apply 2-meter distances. There was no more than that, but something visible often can help. I must admit, when I meet friends that I know in the street, it's so easy. You start off 2 meters away, and then you sort of just forget, don't you? You sort of, without those visible stimulus, you know, to remind you, it can be easy to forget. In lettings, is there any guidance on lettings at schools or lettings have stopped, but when can we consider taking on privately? So are these lettings that you let out space to people and you are getting an income from them? Can I just unmute you, Sherilyn? I'll just find you. Where are you? There you are. So you might need to unmute yourself. Could you just give me a bit more background? Hi there.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
That's great. No, I just wanted to inquire about the lettings. We normally let out our gym, like the sports hall. We have an AstroTurf. We have tennis courts. Our main school hall. We've put a halt to all lettings since lockdown, and I just want to consider, or if there's any particular guidance in terms of revisiting that, especially we have outdoor tennis courts. So is that something we could possibly look at, or should we halt that until further guidance is published?
Okay, I am not sure if there's an official answer. Obviously, it depends. For me, it would depend on the particular activity and whether social distance could be maintained. Now, obviously, tennis courts, golf, fishing, and those kind of things have been allowed by the government, and so personally, I don't see any problem to letting out a tennis court if it could be done remotely and ensuring that 2-meter distance, so possibly online booking and online payment. But I would think it would depend on the activity. Has anyone else got any? Lorna's put her hand up. Lorna, I'm just going to unmute you. I'm not sure if it was an accident or whether you've got a comment on that. Lorna, you'll need to unmute yourself. No. Lorna's not there. Okay, Jane, you've put your hand up. You want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, so we've got an AstroTurf, and yeah, we've got a swimming pool, and the swimming, the swimming clubs are asking, can they use the swimming pool over the summer holidays, and we just don't know yet.
Okay, it's a question that we can ask DFE if you want. we can always ask the question. So I don't know the answer is at the moment, but we can ask the question for you. So we'll take that one away.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, the links to, oh no, yes, we can send it. So Lynn says the link to the compliance checks isn't working. It says pay's not working. I checked it today and it worked. Oh, right, okay. So what we will do is I will email it out to all of you, so you don't even have to worry. So we'll sort it. Okay. Vic, stop to the lettings, bit of a headache. My issue with restarting is it helps cleaning. Yeah, it would. Yeah, okay. Jack, we are penciling in lettings from September. No lettings being taken up to the end of term. Depending on the guidance, we may look at lettings during the term. Oh, yes, I can unmute you, Lorna. There you go. Hi, Lorna.
Hi. I just wanted to let you know what we're trying to do in terms of lettings, and hopefully it might help a little bit.
Yes, please.
The current guidance we have is from the government, not so much about lettings, but just about gatherings. So I think it's up to 6 people from different households can meet out with distancing. So the only people we have allowed on site are to be carried out on the ground, so they're external, to minimize the risk of any contamination, if you like. So there's only 6 of them allowed on location. It generally is some sort of fitness-based exercise, so they don't come. So it's not tennis, it's just literally a fitness, and they're outdoors, they're 2 meters apart from each other at all times. I'm just thinking if it's competitive sports, they might contact each other, so it's not something that we would agree to.
Okay.
Group back. There's request for indoor completely, because we have recommissioned those areas, the gyms and sports hall, for the welfare of the children and vulnerable students. So we didn't want the risk that if cleaning wasn't done completely to our satisfaction or their satisfaction, that there's any comeback from that. That's all we've done for now.
Okay, thanks. No, that's useful.
Thank you,
Lorna.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions before we sort of wrap it up? Anything at all? Put your hands up, or otherwise we will take it as read. Okay, thank you very much. It's been a bit of a canter through in 40 minutes or so. Hopefully it was of some use, even if it's just really told you that you've got as much information as you had thought you had, and you haven't missed anything. But as I say, I think things will change quite rapidly in the next few weeks and months. And if we can set up an online discussion and raise questions that you would like to ask, then hopefully that will help you out. So thank you very much, and hopefully we will see you and talk to you again soon, and I'll send that documentation out this afternoon to you. Thanks, and I will just close it for everyone. So, okay, bye-bye.